The air in Newark, New Jersey, in the summer of 1963, was a thick, humid blanket, heavy with the scent of damp earth after a sudden shower, exhaust fumes from passing cars, and the faint, sweet promise of honeysuckle clinging to chain-link fences. It was a city humming with a particular kind of rhythm, a vibrant, often challenging pulse that beat just beneath the surface of everyday life. On August 19, a new note was added to that complex symphony. Whitney Elizabeth Houston arrived, a tiny, dark-eyed infant born into a family where music wasn't just a passion, but the very oxygen they breathed. Her first sounds were likely not the gentle coos of a typical baby, but the soaring, melismatic improvisations of her mother, Cissy. Cissy Houston, a force of nature in her own right, was a gospel legend in the making, her voice a raw, undeniable power that could shake the rafters of any church and stir the deepest corners of the soul. Whitney's earliest memories would have been a kaleidoscope of sound, the rich, resonant chords of a Hammond organ swelling through their home, the thunderous clap of hands during Sunday service, the intricate harmonies woven by her mother and aunts as they rehearsed. The scent of fried chicken and collard greens mingled with the sharp tang of floor polish and the heady perfume of lilies from the church altar. Their home, a modest, brick-fronted house, was less a dwelling and more a living, breathing instrument. Every surface seemed to vibrate with melody. Records spun on the turntable, gospel hymns giving way to the smooth, sophisticated sounds of soul, and R.B. Whitney, a small, observant child, watched her mother move through this world of sound with an almost regal grace, her voice a conduit for something divine. She saw the way people reacted to Cissy, tears in their eyes, shouts of praise, a collective sigh of release. It was a potent lesson in the transformative power of a single voice. Her cousin, Dionne Warwick, already a star, a beacon of elegance and chart-topping success, was another constant presence, a living testament to the heights a black woman from their community could reach through song. Whitney absorbed it all, a sponge in a sonic ocean. The world outside their door, with its whispers of racial tension and the grinding realities of urban life in the late 60s and early 70s, sometimes felt distant, muted by the sheer volume and beauty of the music within their walls. Yet, the resilience and fire of that era, the struggle for civil rights, the burgeoning Black Pride movement, also infused the very essence of the music Cissy sang, a deep, unwavering strength that Whitney would inherit. As she grew, a natural curiosity pulled her towards the source of these sounds. The New Hope Baptist Church became her second home. There, amidst the polished pews and the stained glass windows that cast jewel-toned light across the congregation, she found her voice. It was a shy, almost tentative sound at first, a small bird testing its wings in the grand, echoing space. But even then, there was something undeniably pure about it, a clarity that cut through the cacophony. She would stand beside her mother in the choir, her small face alight with concentration, mimicking Cissy's inflections, learning the intricate dance of breath and pitch. The vibrations of the organ would course through her small body, a physical manifestation of the spirit moving through the music. She wasn't just singing notes, she was feeling them, absorbing the emotion, the story, the prayer embedded in every lyric. She was innocent, yes, but deeply impressionable, her nascent vocal gift already stirring, a quiet, powerful force waiting for its moment to unfurl. The warmth of the congregation's smiles, the approving nod from Cissy, the sheer joy of creating harmony, these were the foundational bricks of her world, laid in a vibrant, musically charged atmosphere, an incubator for the extraordinary talent that was beginning to bloom. The mid-1970s arrived, bringing with them the awkward grace of adolescence and a new kind of rhythm to Whitney's life. The innocence of childhood began to recede, replaced by an eager ambition that pulsed just beneath her skin. She was no longer just a child in the choir, she was a teenager, navigating the labyrinthine halls of Franklin High School, her textbooks often sharing space in her bag with demo tapes and glossy fashion magazines. The scent of freshly printed paper from her schoolbooks mingled with the more exotic, alluring perfumes of the fashion world she was tentatively exploring. Her voice, no longer tentative, had begun to blossom, gaining a richness and power that belied her years. It was a voice that could effortlessly blend into the background, supporting the established giants, yet possessed an undeniable individual spark. She found herself increasingly drawn into the professional music scene, a world away from the familiar comfort of the church. She worked as a background vocalist, her pristine harmonies adding texture to the raw energy of Chaka Khan's performances, a subtle counterpoint to Lou Rawls's smooth baritone. The late-night studio sessions, with their glowing mixing boards, the hushed intensity of producers, and the rhythmic click of the metronome, became her new classroom. She learned the discipline of the studio, the art of holding a harmony, the precision required to deliver a perfect take. The air in those studios was often thick with cigarette smoke, the faint metallic tang of old equipment, and the intoxicating scent of creativity. She felt the electric hum of possibility, a sense that she was on the cusp of something monumental. But the music world wasn't her only foray into the public eye. Her striking beauty, those luminous eyes and radiant smile, caught the attention of modeling scouts. Suddenly, she was posing for 17 magazine, her image gracing its pages, a vision of youthful glamour. The contrast between the gritty reality of studio recording, where she was just another voice in the chorus, and the polished, idealized world of fashion was stark. One moment, she was in faded jeans and a t-shirt, singing into a microphone. The next, she was draped in designer clothes, her hair perfectly coiffed, under the harsh, flattering lights of a photography studio. This duality, this early experience of presenting different facets of herself to the world, would become a recurring theme in her life. She was eager, ambitious, slightly restless, confident in her talent but still searching for the right platform, the perfect stage for her voice to truly soar. There were early record deal offers, tantalizing glimpses of a future she craved, but they never quite felt right, never fully captured the expansive vision she held for herself. She was a young woman on the cusp, her future shimmering with unfulfilled potential, patiently, yet restlessly, awaiting the true moment of her arrival. Then, in the hushed, smoky intimacy of a New York City nightclub in 1983, destiny arrived in the unlikely form of Clive Davis. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey and stale perfume, the low murmur of conversation punctuated by the clinking of glasses. Whitney Houston, ever the powerhouse, was performing, her voice filling the room with its raw, gospel-infused emotion. And there, standing beside her, providing backing vocals, was her daughter, Whitney. Clive Davis, the legendary music executive, founder of Arista Records, was known for his discerning ear, his uncanny ability to spot true talent. He sat in the dim light, a critical observer, yet his attention was immediately, irrevocably captured. It wasn't just the purity of Whitney's voice, though that alone was breathtaking. It was the way she carried herself, even in a supporting role, a quiet intensity, a natural grace, an inner light that seemed to glow from within. He heard the echoes of gospel, the sophistication of soul, the effortless power that seemed to ripple through her very being. He saw not just a singer, but a star, a once-in-a-generation talent. The club, for a moment, seemed to fade away, the other sounds dissolving into a singular focus on her. Their meeting was a pivotal moment, a collision of talent and vision. Clive was immediately captivated, his conviction unwavering. This wasn't just another artist, this was the artist. A landmark record deal with Arista Records swiftly followed, a contract inked with the promise of unparalleled potential. The atmosphere around Whitney became electric with anticipation, the high-stakes environment of the music industry suddenly her new reality. She was thrilled, focused, slightly overwhelmed by the enormity of it all, but utterly determined. She trusted in Clive Davis's vision, his quiet confidence mirroring her own burgeoning belief. The meticulous process of selecting songs and producers for her debut album began, a careful curation designed to showcase her voice in all its versatile glory. Narada Michael Walden, a prominent producer, entered her orbit, one of the many architects who would help craft her sound. It was during this period that Robin Crawford, Whitney's close friend and confidant, became an even more significant presence in her life. Robin was her rock, her shadow, her most trusted ally, a constant source of support in a world that was rapidly expanding and becoming increasingly complex. She was a grounding force amidst the whirlwind, a steady hand to hold onto as Whitney navigated the exhilarating, terrifying landscape of her burgeoning career. The blend of youthful excitement and serious artistic commitment was palpable, a quiet hum of creative energy that permeated every studio session, every song choice, every careful step towards the unveiling of a voice that would soon change the world. The year 1985 arrived, and with it, the release of her self-titled debut album, Whitney Houston. It wasn't merely an album, it was an event, a declaration. The world, perhaps unknowingly, had been waiting for a voice like hers, a voice that soared with effortless power, that vibrated with emotion, yet maintained a pristine clarity. The atmosphere became a whirlwind of success, adoration, and relentless activity. Suddenly, her powerful, pristine vocals were everywhere, echoing from every radio, every television, every record store. Saving All My Love for You was the first siren call, a ballad of aching beauty that showcased her incredible range and emotive depth. It climbed the charts with a quiet inevitability, earning her a Grammy Award and cementing her as a serious artistic force. Then came How Will I Know, an explosion of joyous, infectious pop, demonstrating her versatility and crossover appeal. Its vibrant music video, a kaleidoscope of bright colors and energetic dance, introduced her radiant personality to a global audience. But it was Greatest Love of All that truly solidified her status as the voice. It was an anthem of self-love and resilience, delivered with such conviction and soaring vocal prowess that it became an instant classic, a song that resonated deeply with millions. She embarked on her first major tours, experiencing the dizzying intensity of global fame firsthand. One moment, she was rehearsing in a sterile studio, the next, she was stepping onto vast stages, bathed in spotlights, facing arenas filled with thousands of screaming, adoring fans. The roar of the crowd was a physical force, a wave of pure emotion that washed over her, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. She flew across continents, her schedule a relentless blur of performances, interviews, and meet and greets. The intoxicating blend of euphoria and the dawning realization of monumental responsibility settled upon her. She was exhilarated, triumphant, yet beginning to feel the immense pressure of living up to the unprecedented expectations that now surrounded her every move. There was a sense of disbelief mixed with profound gratitude, a quiet wonder at how her voice had resonated so deeply with so many, and an artistic validation that surpassed anything she could have ever imagined. She was no longer just Whitney, she was a global phenomenon, and her star was only just beginning its ascent. The ascent continued, unchecked and seemingly unstoppable. Between 1987 and 1989, Whitney Houston cemented her position not just as a star, but as a global pop icon, a reigning queen of the music world. The follow-up to her monumental debut, simply titled Whitney, was released in 1987, and its impact was immediate and historic. It became the first album by a female artist to debut at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, a testament to her unprecedented popularity and the feverish anticipation surrounding her every new release. The atmosphere around her was one of continuous achievement, a seemingly endless upward trajectory that defied gravity. More record-breaking hits cascaded forth, each one further solidifying her dominance. I Wanna Dance with Somebody was an irresistible invitation to joy, a vibrant, synth-driven track that became an anthem of the late 80s, showcasing her ability to blend powerful vocals with infectious pop sensibility. Didn't We Almost Have It All offered a return to her ballad roots, a poignant exploration of lost love that once again highlighted her emotional depth. So Emotional and Where Do Broken Hearts Go further demonstrated her versatility, each song a masterclass in vocal delivery and melodic power. Her voice, still pristine and soaring, seemed to grow even more confident, more commanding, with each release. This period was defined by intensive touring and a relentless schedule of media appearances. She traveled the world, a radiant ambassador of pop music, performing for sold-out stadiums and captivated audiences in every corner of the globe. The public image she projected was one of perfection, grace, and unstoppable talent. She was effortlessly beautiful, impeccably dressed, and possessed a stage presence that was both powerful and utterly captivating. Every interview, every televised performance, every magazine cover reinforced this image of an artist at the peak of her powers, seemingly untouched by struggle or doubt. Psychologically, she was confident, dominant, reveling in the artistic validation and the adoration of millions. Yet, even amidst this unparalleled success, a subtle shift began to occur. The sheer scale of her fame, the constant scrutiny, the relentless demands on her time and energy, began to create a new kind of pressure. The isolation that often accompanies such extreme fame started to creep in, a quiet, almost imperceptible distance between her public persona and her private self. The pure joy of her early success, the innocent wonder of her burgeoning talent, slowly began to mingle with the weight of maintaining an impossible standard. She was expected to be perfect, to be flawless, to be the voice, every single moment of every single day. It was a beautiful cage, gilded and adored, but a cage nonetheless, and the subtle burden of its golden bars was just beginning to make itself felt. The world watched, mesmerized, unaware of the quiet, internal shifts happening within the woman who seemed to have it all. The golden bars of her gilded cage, once merely a subtle pressure, began to press in with a new, insistent weight as the 1990s dawned. The flawless public image, so carefully cultivated by Clive Davis and so effortlessly embodied by Whitney herself, was about to collide with a force both exhilarating and ultimately destructive. The air around her, once so pristine and controlled, was about to become charged with a wild, unpredictable energy. It was in 1990, amidst the pulsating rhythms of the music industry's elite, that Whitney met Bobby Brown. He was a hurricane, a whirlwind of raw charisma and unapologetic swagger, a stark contrast to the elegant, almost ethereal persona she had presented to the world. He was the bad boy of R&B, a former member of New Edition, known for his edgy music, his rebellious spirit, and a reputation that danced on the fringes of controversy. Whitney, the undisputed queen of pop, the voice of pristine perfection, found herself undeniably drawn to this untamed spirit. Their first encounters were electric, a clash of worlds that somehow sparked an undeniable connection. She found him funny, charming, exciting, a breath of fresh, albeit chaotic, air in a life that had become meticulously structured. The infatuation was swift, intense, and all-consuming. It was a rebellion against the carefully constructed image, a desperate yearning for something real, something raw, something that felt entirely her own, outside the expectations of millions. The desire for normalcy, for a love that didn't feel like another performance, pulsed within her. She craved a connection that saw her, the woman behind the voice, not just the icon. Bobby, with his rough edges and undeniable charm, seemed to offer that. He didn't treat her like a fragile deity, he treated her like a woman, albeit one he was deeply impressed by. But their romance, fast and passionate, immediately fueled public and media speculation. The tabloids, ever hungry for a narrative that could shatter a perfect image, seized upon it. The pop princess and the bad boy of R&B became the headline, a story too tantalizing to ignore. Fans, accustomed to Whitney's polished grace, expressed confusion, even concern. Industry insiders whispered, the carefully curated atmosphere of her career began to crackle with an undercurrent of excitement and growing apprehension. Yet, even as her personal life began to veer into uncharted territory, her professional prowess remained undeniable. In January 1991, at Super Bowl 25 in Tampa, Florida, Whitney delivered a rendition of The Star-Spangled Banner that transcended mere performance. Dressed in a white tracksuit, her hair pulled back simply, she stood on the field and unleashed a vocal tour de force that was both powerful and deeply reverent. Her voice soared, a cathedral of sound that filled the stadium, echoing with patriotism and raw emotion. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated Whitney, a reminder of the sheer, unassailable power of her gift. The performance became an instant classic, a patriotic touchstone, released as a charity single, its proceeds benefiting soldiers and their families. It was a stark juxtaposition, the public perfection of the voice, against the nascent, tumultuous private life that was beginning to unfold, a life that would soon challenge the very foundations of that pristine image. She was seeking personal connection and a life beyond the spotlight's glare, even if it meant directly challenging the carefully constructed public persona that had brought her such unparalleled success. The year 1992 arrived, a whirlwind of personal milestones and professional triumphs that would forever etch themselves into the annals of pop culture history. The spring air, filled with the scent of jasmine and the promise of new beginnings, seemed to hum with Whitney's accelerating pace. On July 18, she married Bobby Brown, a lavish ceremony that, to the public eye, was a fairy tale come true. She wore a stunning white gown, her smile radiant, her eyes sparkling with a fierce joy. The wedding was a grand spectacle, attended by celebrities and industry titans, a public declaration of a love that, to many, still seemed incongruous. For Whitney, it was a defiant act, a commitment to the man she loved, a statement that her happiness would not be dictated by public opinion. She truly believed in their love, a passionate, consuming bond that felt like a refuge from the relentless pressures of her career. But even then, amidst the confetti and the champagne toasts, there were faint whispers, early tremors of marital strain, the complexities of blending two superstar lives already beginning to surface beneath the glittering facade. Just months later, in November, the world witnessed another facet of her boundless talent with her acting debut in The Bodyguard. The film, co-starring Kevin Costner, was a global phenomenon, a romantic thriller that captivated audiences worldwide. But it was the soundtrack, more than the film itself, that truly became a cultural touchstone. The album, an exquisite showcase for Whitney's voice, would go on to become the best-selling soundtrack of all time, a testament to her unparalleled vocal artistry. The lead single, her breathtaking rendition of Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You, wasn't just a song, it was an emotional earthquake. Her a cappella opening, the raw vulnerability, the slow, powerful build to that soaring, impossible high note, it was a masterclass in vocal performance. a moment that cemented her legacy as one of the greatest singers of all time. The song spent a record-breaking 14 weeks at number 1, dominating airwaves and hearts across the globe. Amidst this unprecedented professional success, a profound personal joy arrived in March 1993 with the birth of her daughter, Bobby Christina Brown. The moment Whitney held her tiny daughter for the first time, a wave of overwhelming, unconditional love washed over her. It was a love unlike any she had ever known, a grounding force that promised to anchor her in a world that often felt adrift. The scent of baby powder and the soft warmth of Bobby Christina's skin against hers were moments of pure, unadulterated bliss. Yet, even in this profound happiness, the immense strain of balancing a demanding, global career with intense personal scrutiny and the early challenges of her new family life began to take its toll. The exhaustion was palpable, the demands relentless. She was professionally triumphant, a global superstar in every sense of the word, but the seeds of future conflict, the relentless pull between her public and private worlds, were already being sown. The years 1993 to 1995 saw the global phenomenon of The Bodyguard continue its reign, solidifying Whitney as a multi-talented superstar whose influence spanned both music and film. Her image was everywhere on magazine covers, movie posters, and blaring from every radio. She was the epitome of grace, beauty, and talent, a woman who seemed to effortlessly conquer every medium she touched. The world still saw the radiant smile, the elegant poise, the voice that could move mountains. However, beneath this glittering facade, cracks began to appear, subtle at first, then growing wider and more visible. The relentless glare of the tabloids, always hungry for scandal, intensified its scrutiny, turning its focus from her professional triumphs to the burgeoning turmoil in her personal life. Rumors of marital discord between Whitney and Bobby Brown began to circulate more widely, whispered in hushed tones by industry insiders and shouted in bold headlines by the gossip rags. Their contrasting lifestyles, once a source of fascination, now became a point of contention. Bobby's legal troubles, which seemed to follow him with an almost magnetic pull, became public fodder, further tarnishing Whitney's carefully polished image. Arrests, court appearances, and reports of erratic behavior associated with him began to cast a long, unsettling shadow over her continued success. And then, the most insidious whispers began, early reports of substance use. They were faint at first, easily dismissed by her team, but they were there, like a persistent hum beneath the surface noise. A missed event here, a slight delay there, a fleeting moment of distraction during an interview. These small anomalies, once overlooked, were now amplified and dissected. The atmosphere, once one of pure adoration, began to shift, tinged with a growing sense of unease among fans and industry insiders. People started to wonder, to speculate. The public's perception of her unblemished perfection began to contend with a more complex, troubling reality. Psychologically, Whitney was becoming increasingly defensive, retreating further into her privacy. The constant barrage of questions about her marriage, about Bobby's troubles, about her own well-being, felt like an invasion, a violation. She tried to shield Bobby Christina from the chaos, to create a haven of normalcy for her daughter, but the walls of her private world felt increasingly porous. She was caught in a growing internal conflict between the relentless demands of her career, the impossible expectations of the public, and the escalating challenges within her marriage. There was a profound sense of isolation, even amidst the throngs of people who surrounded her. The glittering world of Hollywood, once a source of triumph, now felt like a gilded cage, its bars pressing in with an almost suffocating force. She yearned for control, for a way to quiet the noise, to numb the pain that was slowly but surely seeping into every corner of her life. Between 1995 and 1997, Whitney Houston continued her acting career, a testament to her enduring star power and versatility, even as the narrative surrounding her personal life grew increasingly prominent. She found solace, perhaps, in the escapism of film, immersing herself in characters that offered a temporary reprieve from her own escalating struggles. The set of Waiting to Exhale in 1995, a film celebrated for its powerful ensemble of black women, offered a sense of camaraderie and creative fulfillment. She played Savannah Jackson, a successful television producer navigating the complexities of love and friendship, a role that allowed her to explore emotional depths. The soundtrack, another triumph, featured her powerful ballad, Exhale, which became a #1 hit, proving her musical prowess remained undiminished. The aroma of movie set coffee mingled with the faint scent of her character's perfume, a temporary mask she could wear. Then came The Preacher's Wife, in 1996, a warm, heartfelt holiday film where she starred opposite Denzel Washington. As Julia Biggs, a gospel singer, she returned to her roots, her voice resonating with a spiritual purity that evoked memories of her early church days. The accompanying soundtrack, filled with gospel-infused songs, was a critical and commercial success, becoming the best-selling gospel album of all time. These were professional triumphs, undeniable proof that the voice was still very much alive and capable of extraordinary artistry. Yet, despite these continued achievements, the public perception of Whitney began to shift irrevocably. The mystery around her deepened, as the radiant image she had so carefully maintained began to fray around the edges. She missed promotional events, canceled performances at the last minute, and her public appearances became fewer and farther between. When she did appear, there was a perceived decline in her once impeccable composure. Her eyes, once so bright and clear, sometimes seemed shadowed, her movements occasionally less fluid, her famous smile a little more forced. The narrative of her personal life, fueled by relentless tabloid speculation, began to overshadow her artistic endeavors, becoming the dominant story. Fans, who had adored her for her grace and perfection, now watched with a growing sense of concern and confusion. Psychologically, Whitney was resilient, fighting to maintain control over her narrative and her personal life, but she was also increasingly weary. The constant battle against public scrutiny, the widening gap between her public and private selves, was an exhausting burden. She felt the immense weight of growing speculation, the unspoken questions in people's eyes. There was a profound sense of paradox, the joy of creating beautiful music and film, juxtaposed with the quiet agony of her personal struggles becoming an open book for the world to read. She was a woman caught between two worlds, desperately trying to hold on to both, while feeling herself slowly, inexorably, being pulled apart. The beautiful, pristine image was becoming harder and harder to sustain, and the cracks were now visible for all to see. The turn of the millennium, between 1998 and 2000, brought an unsettling blend of artistic resurgence and undeniable personal decline for Whitney Houston. In 1998, she released My Love Is Your Love, an album that was a bold departure from her previous pop ballad-heavy work. It was edgier, more contemporary, infused with elements of hip-hop and R&B, a testament to her artistic evolution and her desire to remain relevant in a changing music landscape. The album received critical acclaim, praised for its raw emotion and Whitney's powerful, still unmistakable vocals. Hit singles like It's Not Right But It's Okay, Heartbreak Hotel, and the title track showcased a grittier, more mature side of the voice. The studio sessions for this album were intense, a creative crucible where she poured her heart and soul, finding a temporary escape in the music. The scent of new recording equipment, the low hum of the monitors, the camaraderie with producers like Rodney Jerkins and Wyclef Jean, offered fleeting moments of pure artistic joy. It was a powerful reminder of her undeniable gift, a defiant roar against the whispers of her decline. However, even as she reclaimed her artistic footing, her public behavior became increasingly erratic, impossible to ignore. The unsettling blend of artistic triumph and personal unraveling created an atmosphere charged with rumor and speculation. Cancelled performances became more frequent, leaving thousands of disappointed fans and sparking widespread concern. During interviews and public appearances, signs of distress were visibly apparent. Her once radiant composure would sometimes falter, her eyes would dart, her answers would become evasive or strangely disjointed. The famous "Crack is Whack" interview with Diane Sawyer, though still a few years off, was foreshadowed by these earlier, unsettling moments where her public persona seemed to slip, revealing a vulnerability and confusion that was profoundly disturbing. The world witnessed a beloved icon struggling visibly, leading to a mix of pity, shock, and confusion. Fans grappled with the cognitive dissonance of hearing her soaring, pristine voice on the radio, then seeing a troubled, disoriented woman on television. The media, of course, feasted on every misstep, every cancelled show, every odd comment. Psychologically, Whitney was volatile, vulnerable, and increasingly embattled. She was caught in a desperate attempt to find artistic expression amidst profound personal turmoil. The pressure of her struggles becoming a public spectacle was immense, a crushing weight that intensified her internal torment. She felt exposed, judged, unable to hide the demons that were relentlessly pursuing her. There were moments of clarity, of fierce determination to reclaim her life, but they were often overshadowed by the overwhelming force of her struggles. The album was a cry for help, a testament to her enduring artistic spirit, but the woman behind the voice was slowly, tragically, losing her grip on the perfect life she had once so effortlessly embodied. The once clear line between Whitney Houston, the global icon, and Whitney Houston, the struggling woman, was blurring into a painful, public tragedy. The new millennium dawned, but for Whitney Houston, it brought not a renewal of light, but a deepening shadow. The delicate balance she had struggled to maintain between her public perfection and private turmoil finally shattered, dramatically and irrevocably. The years from 2001 to 2006 would become a period of profound public decline, an agonizing, slow-motion tragedy unfolding under the unblinking eye of the world. The pristine image, once her shield and her crown, was not merely tarnished, it was utterly, painfully broken. The infamous "crack is whack" interview with Diane Sawyer in 2002 became a grim watershed. Seated opposite the seasoned journalist, under the harsh, unyielding glare of studio lights, Whitney was a stark contrast to the radiant icon of years past. Her eyes, once pools of liquid light, held a defensive, almost haunted glint. Her posture, usually so regal, seemed slightly slumped, her movements a little stiff. The air in the studio was thick with unspoken tension, a palpable sense of impending revelation. When the words tumbled out, "Crack is whack, I don't do crack. I would never do crack. Crack is cheap. I make too much money to ever smoke crack. That's whack," they were delivered with a defiant, almost frantic energy, punctuated by a dismissive wave of her hand. But the very vehemence of her denial, the strange, almost childlike phrasing, only amplified the public's growing unease. The world collectively winced, not just at the words themselves, but at the visible distress behind them. It wasn't just an interview, it was an intervention played out on a global stage, a raw, unfiltered glimpse into the chaos that had consumed her. The scent of fear, of desperation, seemed to permeate the television screens. This interview, coupled with the escalating reports of erratic behavior, missed performances, and increasingly visible signs of substance use, cemented her image as a fallen idol. The whispers of "the voice" being lost, of a talent squandered, grew into a deafening roar. Her once impeccable appearance often gave way to disheveled moments, her once crystalline voice occasionally faltered in public appearances. The meticulous grace of her movements was sometimes replaced by a jittery restlessness. Then came Being Bobby Brown, in 2005, a reality television show that flung open the doors to her tumultuous marriage, exposing its darkest corners to millions. The camera, an insatiable voyeur, captured a chaotic, often disturbing reality: screaming matches, public outbursts, the raw, unedited dysfunction that had become her everyday life. The show, intended perhaps to humanize them, instead amplified the tragedy, transforming their private hell into public spectacle. The stale air of their mansion, the echoes of their arguments, the visible strain on their faces, it was all laid bare. For Whitney, it was a further erosion of privacy, another layer stripped away, leaving her vulnerable and exposed. She was caught in a cycle of addiction and public humiliation, each feeding the other, spiraling downwards. Her psychological state was one of deep distress, defensive against a world that seemed to delight in her downfall, yet increasingly isolated even amidst the constant public gaze. She felt a profound sense of loss of control, a terrifying realization that the woman she once was, the artist she aspired to be, was slipping further and further away, replaced by this embattled, struggling figure. Interventions by family and close friends, particularly her mother Sissy and her longtime mentor Clive Davis, became increasingly frequent and increasingly difficult. Sissy, her heart aching, would try to reason, to plead, to remind Whitney of the talent, the faith, the strength that had once defined her. Clive, ever the unwavering supporter, would offer guidance, resources, pathways to recovery. But the grip of addiction was too strong, the walls of denial too high. Each attempt, each heartfelt plea, often met with resistance, anger, or a fragile, fleeting promise that would ultimately break. The atmosphere around her during these years was one of profound sadness, a tragedy unfolding in slow motion, generating a mix of pity, shock, and judgment from a public that had once adored her unconditionally. Her once pristine image lay shattered, a million glittering fragments scattered across the unforgiving landscape of celebrity. A fragile, tentative dawn broke in 2007. The air, still heavy with the lingering scent of past struggles, began to carry a faint, hopeful breeze. Whitney Houston, after years of public turmoil and private anguish, made a monumental decision. She filed for divorce from Bobby Brown. It was more than just a legal separation, it was a desperate, defiant act of self-preservation, a signal to herself and to the world that she was attempting to reclaim her life, to sever the ties that had bound her to a cycle of chaos. The decision was born of profound exhaustion, a weariness that had settled deep into her bones, but also a flicker of renewed determination. The legal proceedings were a painful, drawn-out affair, dissecting the broken fragments of their marriage under the harsh light of the courts. But for Whitney, it was a necessary cleansing, a painful cauterization of a wound that had festered for too long. She yearned for stability, not just for herself, but most critically, for her daughter, Bobby Christina. The thought of her daughter, growing up amidst the constant turbulence, was a powerful motivator, a reason to fight for a fresh start. She focused on her health, on the arduous, often brutal process of sobriety. The days were a battle, each hour a victory over the cravings, the memories, the ingrained habits. She embraced therapy, detox, the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding a shattered self. During this fragile period of transition, a steady, unwavering presence emerged as a guiding force. Pat Houston, Whitney's sister-in-law. Pat, with her quiet strength and pragmatic resolve, stepped into a more prominent managerial role. She became more than just a family member. She was a confidant, an advocate, a protective shield against the outside world, and a firm hand when needed. Pat's presence brought a much-needed sense of order to Whitney's life, a calm port in the storm. The atmosphere around Whitney began to shift, cautiously optimistic, a sense that she was attempting to reclaim her identity away from the tumultuous marriage, to find the woman she once was. Psychologically, Whitney was navigating a complex emotional landscape. There was immense relief at having finally broken free from the destructive dynamic with Bobby, a profound sense of having escaped a burning building. But this relief was tempered by an equally profound exhaustion, the emotional aftermath of years of struggle, the lingering pain of a love that had gone so tragically wrong. She grappled with the guilt, the shame, the public humiliation, but also with a fierce resolve to overcome it all. She was seeking sobriety not just as an escape, but as a pathway back to herself, back to her daughter, back to the music. The road ahead was long, arduous, and fraught with peril, but for the first time in years, Whitney felt a glimmer of hope that she might just find her way home. The quiet hum of renewed purpose, though still faint, began to resonate within her. The year 2009 arrived, carrying with it the immense weight of expectation and the fragile promise of a comeback. The music world held its breath as Whitney Houston, the voice, herself, attempted a highly anticipated return with her new album, I Look to You. The title alone spoke volumes, a testament to her journey, her faith, her yearning for redemption. The atmosphere was charged with a blend of excitement for the return of a legend and a growing apprehension about her ability to sustain it. Could she truly reclaim her throne? Had the years of struggle irrevocably altered that unparalleled voice? The initial reception was nothing short of triumphant. The album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, a powerful statement that her loyal fanbase, and indeed the world, was still deeply invested in her. The scent of victory, of vindication, was sweet. She gave several high-profile interviews, her eyes shining with a renewed, albeit vulnerable, optimism. She spoke openly, with a quiet strength, about her sobriety, her battles, her determination to move forward. The public hung on her every word, eager to believe in her resurgence, to witness the phoenix rising from the ashes. There was a sense of collective hope, a universal yearning for her to succeed, to prove that talent and spirit could overcome even the deepest valleys. Psychologically, Whitney was a complex tapestry of emotions. She was hopeful, vulnerable, and deeply invested in this comeback. There was immense pride in her achievement, in having battled back from the brink to deliver new music that resonated with her fans. She felt a surge of artistic validation, a confirmation that her gift, though scarred, was still potent. The recording sessions for I Look to You had been a labor of love and immense effort, a testament to her enduring passion for music. She poured every ounce of her experience, her pain, her newfound resolve into each note. However, the dawning reality of the physical and vocal toll her past struggles had taken began to make itself heartbreakingly clear during her early performances. The voice, once so effortlessly soaring, now showed signs of strain. The crystalline purity, the seemingly boundless power, was occasionally replaced by a rasp, a slight tremble, a visible effort to hit those iconic high notes. During a performance on Good Morning America, for instance, her voice cracked, her breath control wavered, and the once effortless runs were now a struggle. The vibrant energy of her past performances was sometimes replaced by a hesitant stiffness. The sound of her voice, though still undeniably beautiful, was no longer the unblemished instrument of her youth. The concern among fans and critics, initially muted by the euphoria of her return, began to grow. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into open discussion. The question wasn't if she had the voice, but how much of it remained, and at what cost. The dream of a complete, seamless comeback began to fray at the edges, replaced by a heartbreaking apprehension. She felt the weight of that apprehension, the unspoken questions in the audience's eyes, the knowing glances. It was a cruel paradox, the triumph of her album, juxtaposed with the painful reality of her vocal limitations, a stark reminder that some scars, no matter how much one fought, might never fully heal. The spotlight, once her greatest ally, now seemed to highlight every imperfection, every crack in the facade. The fragile hope of 2009 quickly dissolved into a public spectacle of a legend struggling, a painful, undeniable descent that played out across the global stage. The years 2010 to 2011 brought Whitney Houston's Nothing But Love World Tour to Europe, an ambitious undertaking meant to solidify her comeback. Instead, it became a tragic testament to the devastating toll her battles had taken. The atmosphere around the tour was heavy with disappointment, sadness, and renewed, frantic speculation about her well-being. From the very first shows, the tour was plagued by negative reviews. Critics, once fawning, now wrote with a mix of sorrow and brutal honesty. Her vocal struggles were undeniable. Missed notes, a raspy quality that replaced her once silken tone, and a visible, often agonizing effort to reach pitches that had once been effortless. The intricate runs and soaring crescendos that were her signature were now a strange shadow of their former glory. The sound of her voice, once a torrent of pure, unadulterated power, had become a hesitant, sometimes broken stream. Her stage presence, too, had changed. The confident, almost regal grace was often replaced by an erratic, sometimes disoriented demeanor. She would forget lyrics, ramble between songs, or appear disconnected from the audience. There were moments of brilliance, flashes of the old Whitney that sent shivers down spines, but these were increasingly fleeting, quickly swallowed by the larger narrative of her decline. The scent of regret, of a talent battling against its own limitations, hung heavy in the air of each concert hall. Many shows were canceled or cut short, leaving thousands of disappointed fans in their wake. The public outcry was immediate and widespread. Social media buzzed with heartbroken comments, news reports dissected every missed note, every unsteady movement. For those who had adored her for decades, it was a profoundly painful experience, watching their idol visibly struggling, battling not just her voice, but what appeared to be her very self. The narrative of her decline, once whispered, then murmured, now became tragically undeniable, shouted from every headline. Psychologically, Whitney was devastated, embarrassed, and increasingly fragile. Each negative review, each cancelled show, each disappointed face in the audience was a fresh wound. The profound sense of failure was crushing, a weight that pressed down on her with relentless force. She was battling physical limitations, her voice, her stamina, and the insidious resurgence of personal demons that had never truly been vanquished. The crushing weight of public judgment, the feeling of letting down millions, was almost unbearable. She yearned for the voice that had once been her superpower, the instrument that had connected her to the divine, but it felt increasingly out of reach, a phantom limb. The tour, meant to be her triumphant return, had instead become a public display of her vulnerability, a painful, drawn-out goodbye to the effortless perfection that had once defined her. She felt exposed, stripped bare, battling against forces both internal and external that threatened to consume her entirely. The air around her was thick with the silent screams of a trapped soul. As 2012 dawned, a pervasive sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air around Whitney Houston. Despite renewed efforts at sobriety, including another stint in rehab, her struggles persisted, stubbornly clinging to her like a shroud. The fragile hope of a full recovery, of a sustained return to her former self, began to dim, replaced by a quiet, collective despair among those closest to her. The scent of lingering desperation, of battles fought and often lost, permeated her immediate circle. She was seen frequently with Ray J, an R&B singer and television personality, in the weeks leading up to the Grammy Awards. Their companionship was noted, but for those who truly knew Whitney, it was another sign of the complex, often chaotic currents that still ran through her life. Friends and family observed signs of continued substance use, subtle at first, then more pronounced. The telltale shifts in mood, the glazed eyes, the moments of disorientation, the sudden bursts of energy followed by profound fatigue, these were all too familiar, too heartbreakingly clear to those who had witnessed her struggles for so long. The erratic behavior, though perhaps less publicly visible than in years past, was a private torment for her inner circle. The atmosphere around her was tense, almost suffocating. There was a palpable sense of impending crisis, a quiet dread that settled deep in the hearts of those who loved her. Pat Houston, ever vigilant, tried to intervene, to guide, to protect, but even her formidable resolve felt tested by the insidious grip of Whitney's demons. Sissy, from afar, could only pray, her voice heavy with a mother's anguish. The public, largely unaware of the extent of her immediate struggles, still harbored a hopeful, if cautious, expectation for her presence at the upcoming Grammy events. They remembered the legend, the voice, the icon, not the embattled woman teetering on the precipice. But for those watching closely, the signs were there, stark and undeniable. Whitney was exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually. She was embattled, fighting a war within herself that had raged for far too long. There was a profound sense of weariness that permeated her being, a deep-seated fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. She was likely feeling trapped in a cycle she desperately wanted to break, caught between the fleeting euphoria of escape and the crushing weight of its consequences. Perhaps there was a fleeting hope for stability, a quiet prayer for peace, but ultimately, she was overwhelmed by her circumstances, a prisoner in her own gilded cage, the bars now pressing in with an unbearable finality. The vibrant energy of Los Angeles, preparing for its biggest night in music, felt like a cruel, glittering backdrop to her quiet, internal collapse. The silence before the storm was deafening. The vibrant energy of Los Angeles, usually a glittering promise of opportunity and glamour, felt like a cruel, glittering backdrop to her quiet, internal collapse. The silence before the storm was deafening, a heavy blanket of unspoken dread that clung to those closest to her. Then, the Grammys week descended, a maelstrom of flashing lights, red carpets, and the relentless hum of industry buzz. Whitney Houston arrived in Los Angeles, her presence immediately a topic of hushed conversation. The air, typically thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and fresh ambition, now carried a disquieting undertone of apprehension whenever she entered a room. From February 8th to the 10th, she moved through pre-Grammy events like a ghost at a feast, a spectral presence amidst the vibrant, expectant crowds. At the Beverly Hilton Hotel, where many of the industry's elite gathered, Whitney was a stark figure of contrast. Her once impeccable attire often appeared slightly disheveled, a stray strand of hair escaping a hurried coiffure, a dress perhaps not quite sitting as perfectly as it once would have. Her makeup, usually a meticulous artistry, seemed to struggle to conceal the fatigue etched around her eyes, those luminous windows that now often held a distant, agitated glint. The famous smile, once so effortless and radiant, sometimes felt forced, a mask she struggled to hold in place. She walked with a restless energy, a nervous tremor sometimes visible in her hands, a subtle sway in her posture that spoke of a deep disquiet. Ray J, her companion during these final weeks, was often by her side, a younger, more vibrant presence, yet even he seemed unable to fully anchor her. Pat Houston, ever watchful, felt a constant knot of worry tightening in her stomach. She saw the familiar signs, the subtle shifts in Whitney's demeanor, the fleeting moments of disorientation that were almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but screamed volumes to those who knew the intricate landscape of her struggles. The scent of her expensive perfume, once a signature of her elegance, now seemed to mingle with a faint, almost imperceptible tang of something else, a ghost of her ongoing battle. At one event, she reportedly clashed with former X Factor contestant Stacey Francis, a moment of public agitation that sent ripples of concern through the room. The whispers grew louder, the glances more pointed. It was a desperate attempt to engage in the industry she loved, to be part of the celebration, but her deteriorating health and ongoing struggles cast a long, inescapable shadow. Her final public performance was at Kelly Price's pre-Grammy party. The atmosphere in the club was electric, a pulsing beat of anticipation and camaraderie. The air was thick with the rich aroma of food, the clinking of glasses, and the excited chatter of musicians and industry figures. When Kelly Price called her to the stage, a hush fell over the room, quickly replaced by a roar of applause. Whitney, stepping into the spotlight, still possessed an undeniable magnetic pull. She sang, "Jesus Loves Me," a gospel hymn, a poignant return to the very roots of her voice, infused with a raw, undeniable emotion. Her voice, though showing the strain of years of abuse, still held moments of that unparalleled power, that ability to connect directly to the soul. There were cracks, yes, notes she struggled to hold, but there were also flashes of the old Whitney, moments where the sheer force of her spirit seemed to transcend her physical limitations. The crowd, a mix of concern and reverence, cheered her on, willing her to soar. It was a desperate, beautiful, heart-wrenching performance, a final, public offering of her gift, overshadowed by the visible signs of her ongoing battle. When she stepped off stage, the exhaustion was palpable, the brief surge of adrenaline fading, leaving her depleted. The weight of the world, of her struggles, seemed to settle back upon her shoulders with a crushing finality. The morning of Saturday, February 11, 2012, dawned with a deceptively gentle light filtering through the windows of the Beverly Hilton. The usual Saturday hum of a bustling hotel was present, the faint clinking of breakfast dishes, the distant murmur of conversations, the soft scent of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the corridors. But within Suite 434, a different kind of quiet reigned, a profound stillness that would soon shatter the world. Pat Houston, Whitney's sister-in-law and manager, had been with her, trying to organize outfits for Clive Davis's annual pre-Grammy Gala that evening. Pat left the suite briefly, just to retrieve a dress from her own room, a mundane errand that would forever be seared into her memory as the last ordinary moment. When she returned, the suite was silent. The air was still, almost heavy, with the faint, sweet scent of gardenia, Whitney's favorite. Pat moved through the living area, calling Whitney's name, her voice echoing in the sudden emptiness. A growing unease tightened in her chest. She found Whitney in the bathroom, lying face down in the bathtub, submerged in water. The sight was a tableau of unspeakable horror, a scene that would haunt Pat's waking moments and invade her dreams for years to come. The water, still and reflecting the bathroom lights, seemed to mock the stillness of Whitney's form. Pat's scream, a raw, primal sound of disbelief and terror, tore through the quiet of the suite. She pulled Whitney from the tub, her mind reeling, her hands trembling as she tried to find a pulse, to coax a breath from the unresponsive body. The cold, unyielding reality of what she was touching sent a wave of nausea through her. The hotel security was called, then paramedics. The sound of sirens, usually distant city noise, now screamed closer, a brutal soundtrack to the unfolding tragedy. The controlled chaos of the emergency responders filled the suite, the urgent, clipped voices, the rhythmic thud of CPR, the sterile smell of antiseptic cutting through the gardenia. For what felt like an eternity, they worked, their faces grim, their movements precise, fighting a battle that was already lost. At 3:55 p.m., despite their efforts, Whitney Houston was pronounced dead at the scene. The words, delivered with a quiet, professional finality, echoed in the stunned silence that followed. The sterile reality of death, stark and unyielding, had claimed its iconic victim. The news, initially a whisper from within the hotel, erupted like a supernova across the globe. Within minutes, it dominated headlines, tore through social media, and sent shockwaves of grief, confusion, and disbelief across every continent. The internet exploded, phones rang off the hook, news anchors struggled to maintain composure. The collective gasp of the world was almost audible. For Clive Davis, preparing for his gala just floors below, the news was a devastating blow, a personal loss that shook him to his core. He had nurtured her, believed in her, loved her like a daughter. For Sissy Houston, the call brought a mother's worst nightmare to agonizing fruition, a pain so profound it threatened to consume her. Bobby Brown, separated by distance and years of tumultuous history, received the news in a haze of shock and sorrow, his past with Whitney now forever frozen in time. And for Bobby Christina Brown, just 18 years old, the world collapsed, her mother, her anchor, her everything, suddenly gone. The dawning horror of her passing was absolute, a void that instantly swallowed her young life. The atmosphere was one of profound shock and immense sadness, marking a tragic, sudden end to a life of unparalleled triumph and profound personal struggle. The immediate aftermath of Whitney Houston's death plunged the world into a somber period of investigation and public mourning, intertwined with an intense, often intrusive, media speculation. From February 12 to March 22, 2012, the search for answers became a global preoccupation, a desperate attempt to reconcile the vibrant, powerful icon with the tragic reality of her final moments. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office initiated its investigation, a cold, scientific process that stood in stark contrast to the outpouring of raw emotion from fans and family. The sterile environment of the autopsy room, the detached professionalism of the medical examiners, worked methodically to piece together the truth. Every detail was meticulously catalogued, every specimen analyzed. The air in those labs was thick with the scent of disinfectant and the quiet hum of machinery, a world away from the concert halls Whitney once commanded. Initial rumors swirled with a frantic energy, theories of foul play, of a sudden, inexplicable collapse, of an overdose. The media, hungry for any scrap of information, fueled the speculation, creating a cacophony of conjecture. But slowly, painstakingly, the scientific truth began to emerge. On March 22, the official cause of death was determined to be accidental drowning, with heart disease and cocaine use listed as contributing factors. The findings were delivered with a clinical precision, yet their implications were anything but. The world grappled with the official findings, a complex revelation that brought both a painful clarity and lingering questions. Accidental drowning felt too mundane, too simple for a life so extraordinary. But the contributing factors, heart disease, and cocaine use, were a tragic validation of earlier fears, a confirmation of the demons she had battled so publicly, so fiercely, and ultimately, so unsuccessfully. The cocaine, found in her system, was not just a drug, it was a symbol of her long, agonizing struggle, a silent killer that had eroded her health, her voice, and ultimately, her life. Psychologically, for Whitney Houston, the report was a confirmation of her deepest fears, a painful validation of the battles she had watched her daughter fight, often from a heartbreaking distance. The tears she shed were not just for the loss, but for the torment Whitney had endured. Pat Houston, who had been so close, so intimately involved in Whitney's attempts at sobriety, felt a profound sorrow, a sense of, what if, that would forever echo in her mind. She knew the fight, had seen the relapses, had prayed for a different outcome. For Clive Davis, it was a confirmation of the immense pressures that had weighed on his protégé, a stark reminder of the dark side of the glittering world they inhabited. He reflected on her life, her struggles, and the constant, overwhelming demands placed upon her. The finality of the report was a painful confirmation of the demons she had battled, a tragic period at the end of a complicated, beautiful, and ultimately heartbreaking sentence. The public, too, felt a mix of profound sorrow and a search for understanding, trying to reconcile the radiant superstar with the painful reality of her final, lonely moments. On Saturday, February 18, 2012, a week after her passing, the world turned its gaze to Newark, New Jersey, the humble birthplace of a global icon. It was a pilgrimage, a solemn return to her roots, a final farewell in the sanctuary where her voice had first found its wings, the New Hope Baptist Church. The air in Newark, though still touched by the winter chill, carried a different kind of solemnity, a profound sense of communal grief mixed with an enduring pride. The church itself, with its familiar brick facade and stained glass windows, was transformed into a place of global mourning. The scent of lilies and roses, mingled with the faint, comforting aroma of old wood polish, filled the sanctuary. Inside, the pews, where Whitney had once sat as a child, were now filled with a star-studded congregation, music legends, Hollywood elite, family, and lifelong friends, all united in their grief. The contrast between the simple, spiritual setting and the immense fame of those gathered was striking, a powerful testament to Whitney's reach. The service was a deeply emotional and spiritual farewell, a carefully orchestrated blend of immense grief and a powerful, resonant celebration of her extraordinary life and music. The sound of gospel hymns, sung with raw, heartfelt emotion, filled the church, echoing the very melodies that had shaped Whitney's earliest years. Her own songs, played softly or sung by those who loved her, served as poignant reminders of her unparalleled gift. Clive Davis, her mentor, stood at the podium, his voice thick with emotion. He spoke not just as an industry titan, but as a father figure, recounting his discovery of her, his unwavering belief in her talent, and the profound professional and personal bond they shared. His words were a testament to her artistic genius, a loving eulogy from the man who had helped present The Voice to the world. Then came Kevin Costner, her co-star from The Bodyguard, who delivered a truly heartfelt and honest tribute. He spoke of his protective friendship, of the pressures she faced, of the simple, beautiful girl he had come to know behind the superstar persona. He recounted intimate details, like her insecurity about her skin color for the film and his steadfast belief in her. His voice, steady yet tinged with sorrow, urged those present to remember the girl who simply wanted to sing, not the troubled celebrity. His speech was a moment of profound vulnerability and truth, cutting through the layers of fame to touch the human core of Whitney. Musical tributes punctuated the service, each one a powerful testament to her influence. Alicia Keys, seated at the piano, poured her soul into a soulful rendition of Send Me a Picture, her voice a mournful echo of Whitney's own power. Stevie Wonder, his voice rich with emotion, offered a moving medley of Ribbon in the Sky and Love's in Need of Love Today, a poignant offering from one legend to another. But it was Cissy Houston, Whitney's mother, who delivered the most raw and powerful eulogy. Her voice, though strained by grief, still held the unyielding strength of a gospel matriarch. She spoke of her daughter, her Nippy, with a fierce, maternal love, acknowledging the struggles without shying away from them, but ultimately celebrating the beautiful spirit and unparalleled talent that had defined her child. Her words were a collective catharsis, a release of pent-up sorrow and a powerful reminder of the enduring bond between mother and daughter. The air was thick with tears, with the shared weight of loss, but also with the soaring sounds of music, a final, public gathering to honor a legacy that would forever resonate. The profound sense of loss was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the moments of remembrance, the enduring power of her music, and the collective understanding that a true legend had passed into eternity. The echoes of Whitney Houston's funeral lingered long after the final hymn faded, creating a profound, unfillable void. As 2012 progressed and stretched into the years beyond, the world began the arduous process of reflecting on her unparalleled musical legacy, her indelible impact on generations of artists, and the cautionary tale woven through the fabric of her personal struggles. Her voice, even in its absence, continued to inspire, a timeless force that transcended death. Her music, a vast catalog of hits, remained a constant presence on airwaves, in films, and in the hearts of millions. I Will Always Love You became an even more poignant anthem, its soaring power now tinged with the sadness of her passing. Saving All My Love for You, How Will I Know, Greatest Love of All. These weren't just songs. They were cultural touchstones, masterpieces of vocal artistry that continued to move, uplift, and comfort. New artists, from pop divas to aspiring gospel singers, cited her as their primary influence, attempting to emulate her effortless runs, her emotional depth, her sheer, unadulterated power. Her technical mastery, her ability to bridge genres, her sheer presence, these qualities cemented her place in the pantheon of music legends, a voice against which all others would forever be measured. The enduring echo of her voice and impact resonated through every studio, every stage, every home where her music played. Yet, alongside this celebration of her artistry, her life served as a complex, often heartbreaking narrative of talent, fame, and vulnerability. The mystery of Whitney Houston, the enigma of how someone so gifted could descend into such profound personal turmoil, became a subject of endless fascination. Documentaries, biographies, and countless articles sought to unravel the threads of her life, to understand the pressures of superstardom, the insidious grip of addiction, and the toll of a tumultuous marriage played out in the public eye. Her story became a stark reminder of the dark underbelly of fame, a cautionary tale whispered in the halls of record labels and Hollywood studios. The atmosphere was one of retrospective analysis, cultural celebration, and an ongoing, almost desperate, fascination with the woman behind the voice. Then, 3 years later, in January 2015, another tragedy struck, adding an unbearable layer to the family's story and deepening the mystery of their fates. Bobby Christina Brown, Whitney and Bobby's only daughter, was found unresponsive in a bathtub, eerily mirroring her mother's death. She remained in a coma for several months before passing away in July 2015. Her death, at just 22 years old, was a devastating echo, a cruel twist of fate that left the world reeling. The parallel was too stark, too heartbreaking to comprehend. It spoke to an intergenerational trauma, a cycle of struggle that seemed to consume the women in this extraordinary family. The mystery of Whitney Houston now extended to her daughter, leaving a profound sense of unanswered questions and an enduring sadness for what might have been. Psychologically, the world was left with a lasting sense of awe for her artistry, profound sadness for her personal struggles, and a poignant understanding of the immense pressures that come with unparalleled superstardom. Her life was a vibrant, soaring symphony, punctuated by discordant notes of pain and loss. She was a woman who gave everything to her music, pouring her soul into every performance, yet struggled to find peace and stability in her private world. The public image of perfection had clashed violently with the raw, human reality of her battles, creating a narrative that was both inspiring and deeply tragic. Whitney Houston's story remains a powerful, unresolved mystery. The unknowable aspects of her inner life, the quiet battles fought behind closed doors, the human vulnerability that lay beneath the superstar sheen, these elements ensure her story continues to resonate, to captivate, and to mourn. Her voice, a gift from God, continues to soar, a beacon of beauty and power, while her life serves as a complex, poignant testament to the beautiful, brutal realities of fame and the enduring, often heartbreaking, search for self. The air still carries the faint, sweet memory of her voice, forever intertwined with the lingering sadness of what was lost.